If y'all need some seats, we got some around the corner. I can pull them out for y'all. Welcome everyone to the February 15th meeting. If y'all don't understand something I say, just ask to repeat it. My sinuses are acting up. Just want to welcome everybody. Glad for the big turnout. Glad to see some new faces. And I know a lot of y'all kin to the Hendrys is here. And just to let you know, I hate to tell you, you need to come to every historical society meeting because somewhere in Taylor County history we point out your family. We're going to start off with prayer and devotion from Tommy.
Good to see everybody tonight, and I'll start off by asking any birthdays this month. This is February. Any February, got one, any more? Got one that's willing to be. We're going to say happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, God bless you. Happy birthday to you. How about that birthday? Any February anniversaries? I don't think we got very many folks right here married because we don't ever have any anniversaries. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity we have to be here tonight. I pray your blessing upon our community, upon our nation at this time, face of the entire decisions that need to be made. I pray that you direct those that are in power that have been given the privilege of serving this nation, that they act in a way that will be on behalf of the citizens of this great nation, always remain strong, faithful to your principles, and be available for our children, for all generations to come. Faithful to these young people that are here tonight. I pray your blessing upon them as they look to the future. They can see how the history of this little community has been brought forth by those that work so hard to make these things available that we have at our disposal today. We ask you to forgive us of our sins and be with Mr. Hendry tonight as he speaks. He brings us the things of remembrance and how family ties are so important to us. So I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. If you'd like to stand.
This way.
Everybody on this side.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Thank you, Tommy. Just a reminder, this year will be our 160th anniversary of Taylor County becoming a county. We have a lot of exciting activities coming up with that. The legislators are going to recognize us. There we have made a proclamation from the House and Senate, and also one of our representatives in D.C. is going to do something special for us, and we might even get a flag from the top of the Capitol in D.C. to be put in here on display. So we're excited about all the great activities that's coming up. We also have some other special products. Adrian, can you announce this real quick for us?
All right, good evening, guys. One of our new products we have here at the Historical Society, or promotions we have going on, is actually a partnership with a local artist. Bill Holcomb is the artist. You probably see him around. Back there in the corner by the entryway are note cards. They are $4.95 a piece, or $5 or $20. They're all his paintings and illustrations. Again, there's something that you can send out as a card or frame, keep them in your house. They're really, really gorgeous. Seen from around Taylor County too, and he's a super talented artist. So, kind of a new thing we have going on. Maybe a nice little gift for your sweetheart if you forgot your Valentine. Which you probably don't have a sweetheart anymore if you forgot your Also, just some reminders of local events going on. We do have the Foley Community Reunion. So people that live in the area work out at the mill. That's going to be April 16th at the Senior Center. And also, the Perry Theater is trying to put on another production. They did a really nice job last time. They need the community support, so anyone that's interested in helping out, if you're a thespian, if you're in stage production, whatever it is that you do play-wise, see Teresa Schmidt at the Perry Theater. She would love your help. Okay? And back to JP.
And just to talk about our artist now who's helping us with this, he's also volunteered his time and talents, and y'all are first to hear it besides the board. He is donating a painting he's doing of the Bloodworth building, and we're going to have limited edition prints. And since it's the 160th anniversary of Taylor County, we're going to have 160 prints available. When it's done, more details will come when he's finished and pricing and everything, but it's just a little sneak peek of some of the activities we got coming up. And we also have a logo we're getting designed especially for 160th, so we might have some shirts and different things going on with that too. Let's see, what else? It's this time again. We need nominations for the Dr. W.T.H. Peacock and Dr. Wilson T. Hendry Award that we give out the last couple years to honor someone who's dedicated to preserving, protecting, and Taylor County history and helping the Historical Society. We're going to meet on this coming Thursday, so if you know anybody you want to recommend or nominate, just write it on a piece of paper, you can throw it through the mail slot, or email us on our email list. Also, the WT Cash Scholarship for the high school. You have to be a senior in high school. The application is available on our website at taylorcountyhistory.com. And then they'll be also available in the guidance office next week. So if you know anyone in high school, maybe fill out the application to receive a $1,000 scholarship from the Taylor County Historical Society. Let's see. Like I said, this Thursday we'll have a board meeting. And also we'll be having a special I'll be open later on this Thursday. We're asking for people to bring up their photographs or documents, the historical documents, and we're going to scan them so we preserve them, protect them in celebration of the 160th, have new artifacts in here in the Historical Society. And we also are reaching out to the Black community for Black History Month to add more history of the Black community in Taylor County Historical Society. So if you know anyone, send them our way. And Dana Sutherland helped us with this. We actually got this. We didn't know, a lot of people didn't know this existed. In 1867, it was the first time Black people had the right to vote in Taylor County. Of course, this is before women's rights to vote, so it was only Black males. We have a list of 35 Black males in Taylor County who voted in 1867 during Reconstruction. And it's quite interesting if you just read some of the locations that they named as polling places. It's also available on our Facebook page. And also, I recently donated this. This is from the 1930s. It's a Pepsi carrying kit, whatever you call it. It has the logo on the side. It says Burton Sports, Perry, Florida on the inside of it. I think that's everything. Can you introduce our speaker tonight?
Thank you, JP. Before I introduce the program tonight, I'd like to tell you about the program next month. This is the month of March. Doug Cruz is going to do a program on the Cruz family. They're a pioneer family here in the county. And hopefully, in our April meeting, we'll have another family presentation. And that's what our theme is this year, is going back. Long-time families in the county. We'd like to have people make presentations. I know that there are a number that have already been made, but you know, we've got a lot of pioneer families here in the county. I'm out of the Hendry family. There's about 22,000 people in Taylor County today. I must be related to about 6,000 of them. I mean, every family that's been here a long time is connected to every family that's been here a long time. But tonight, we're very fortunate to have Arran Hendry and Bob Woodwright give a presentation on the Hendry family. They took a trip to the island of Arran a couple of years ago, and their presentation is absolutely superb. So Arran and Bob, y'all come forward.
Thank you. Everyone here all right? Before we begin, I'd like to recognize my daughter, Marcia Chris, for helping us with this technical support to do this. It sure would have been difficult for the two of us to do it if she hadn't helped us with it. It's a privilege to see him. To share a little bit about the trip that we took to the land of our forefathers. Our experience was at the end of October in 2013. We flew with our wives into Glasgow, Scotland, and then we took the train to Arran on the coast. Next, we took an hour ride into the Isle of Arran and docked at Broderick on the ferry. It was a short walk across the street to the Douglas Hotel where we stayed while we were there. We spent 3 days on the island, which is around 30 miles long and 5 miles wide. The weather was cool and damp while we were there, but it was enjoyable. We really enjoyed ourselves. The food was somewhat different than ours. For example, they served blood pudding for breakfast with bacon and eggs. My favorite food while we were there was fish and chips, which was very similar to a fish fillet and thick-cut ranch-style French fries. I like to stick to that most of the time. Bob rented a car the first morning we were there, and we headed up the road. We had a blast because Bob was driving from the right side of the car to the left side of the road. So it was most difficult when we came to an intersection to try to figure which side of the road to be on the turn. We had a blast with that because there was very little traffic there. It was just 5,000 residents, and the roads were rough, but it wasn't a hazard because there were so few people traveling on the road or driving on the roads. Our first stop was at the Heritage Museum, where we spent some time looking over some genealogy information and collecting some things for us that we could do while we were there. Then we headed north along the east coast. The next stop was at the Broderick Castle, which was filled with hundreds of exotic items from all over the world. It was just amazing. I can't describe to you how many things that were so old and so unique that were in that place. They were centuries old, a lot of them. And so this place was originally a fortress in the 5th century. And the Hamilton family kept it for 500 years. And then in 1958, the government imposed a 90% tax on the property. And so the family gave that fortress to the government, to the National Trust of Scotland, in order to keep the remaining land that they owned. And they wouldn't allow us to take pictures in the castle, so many things for security reasons. But I'm convinced those things in that castle is worth millions of dollars. It was just, I can't tell you how amazing it was to see all those things. As we traveled on, a few things we saw as we headed further north was the Highland cows. And as you see, they look a little different than the county cows. They're subject to a little different weather than our cows are too. Then we saw a distillery on the way. And then a view of Goatfell Peak, which is the highest peak, about 3,000 feet above sea level, as we traveled on. And then we saw a few seals that were swimming on the rocks as we continued north. Upon arriving in Arran, on the northwest part of the island, we saw Arran Castle. Construction of this castle was started in 1250 AD, and they worked on it until 1700 AD when they finished it. The St. Bride's Church of Scotland was our primary destination. Our primary destination to find a possible ancestor, John Hendry's grave was there. This cemetery plot indicates where John Hendry was buried. And we could only see the OH on his name on the headstone there. Now, we have continued to study about our family and do as much research as we can. But in doing so, even since the last presentation we made, we found some conflicting information that we want to share with you. The first thing is, we think that this is the John Hendry who is described in the Hendry of Clan MacNaughton genealogy book. However, his death date is shown as 1738. And the Robert Hendry who came to New Hanover, North Carolina, was born on the Isle of Arran in March of 1752. So that was 14 years after this John Hendry died. So there may be a typo or some other error with the birth and death date. We aren't sure. We'll continue to work on that. The second conflict we found is that in the book Pioneers of Wiregrass, Georgia, Volume 1, which is a known study of families, it shows Robert Hendry coming to New Hanover, North Carolina from the Isle of Arran between 1770 and 1775 with his parents and two brothers. The Hendry Clan of MacNaughton book describes only Robert Hendry and his two brothers coming to America. So, as I mentioned, we're continuing to work on that. So if someone here or you know someone that may have more information, we'd be glad to hear that. And it's, when you search that far back, it's difficult to get all the information. So let's go back to the tour, and Bob will pick up here a little more whenever he begins his presentation. Due to the road construction, we were unable to go all the way around the island as we planned. So we had to backtrack to the hotel and we just called it a day. The next morning, we headed south and around the southern end of the island. The view along the western coast was more open and a better view of the scenery, and it truly was breathtaking. There were so many pastures and fields of sheep and very few houses. It's open and just beautiful. You can believe me when I say that those sheep had an amazing view from some prime real estate, waterfront property. There are several golf courses on the Isle of Arran, and it's a favorite place for people around the world to come and play golf. We saw lots of people doing that while we were there. One of the most interesting things we did on our trip was to hike to Macquarie Moor, which has 11 stone circles that are from the latter Neolithic period to the early Bronze Age, and as far back as 3,500 years. It is believed that this site was chosen because the sun illuminates this area between two mountain peaks during the summer solstice. The inhabitants would also go there at night to observe the heavens, and then later this site was used for burial to some prominent individuals. We continued north until we reached the end of where the construction was, and we weren't able to go any further around to turned around and came back about halfway the distance of the island, and then took the only road that cuts across the island and headed back to Raleigh to our hotel. It has been said that the Isle of Arran is a miniature Scotland packed into 168 beautiful square miles. So I hope that if you haven't already, you can have a chance to look on the internet and review how beautiful it is and how much history there is to look out and see, and you'll take the time to do that because there's a lot there and it is a gorgeous place to see. Or, even better, make the trip like we did and stand on the ground that our forefathers stood on the Isle of Arran so many years ago. And this last picture, what we see is the ancient Hendry coat of arms. And by the way, the slogan that's associated with this coat of arms that they had back then is, "I hope in God." And now my cousin, Bob Boatwright, will come, and he did most of the planning for this trip, and he's also done a lot more family genealogy study than I have. So he'll come and give you a lot more information concerning our family's history. Thank you.
I apologize for being slow on the first pointer. My cousin said, we need to go over this. And I said, why do I need to go over this pointer? I can drive the whole island on the wrong side of the road and with the steering wheel on the wrong side of the car. Why do I need to go over it? So, anyway, I apologize. I'm a proud member of the Hendry clan. My mother was Joyce Hendry, daughter of Alton C. and Callie Scott Hendry. My mother is sister to Norman C., Charles E., and Samuel Hendry. And I claim to be the first cousins of the children of these mentioned uncles. Arran Simeon, my wife, and I made a fantastic trip to Europe several years ago, and one of the highlights was visiting the Isle of Arran. As Arran mentioned, one of the objectives was to see if we could find some more information about our forefather, who we assume migrated from there. And as indicated, we weren't all that successful, but we did do a little investigation and had a great trip along the way. From his slide presentation, you can see that the Isle of Arran is a beautiful place, and I would encourage anyone to make a trip such as that to see another different part of the world. My portion of the presentation tonight will be to discuss some of the details of the Hendry surname, particularly as if we understand them to, one, have migrated within Scotland, and then secondly, to have migrated to America. At the outset, I would like to emphasize that I make no claim to be an expert, and there are likely to be others in this gathering here who could do just as good a job or better than I. And while I'm at it, I'd like to acknowledge those who have worked hard to compile and put together through the years all the historical information and that data that we have on the Hendry family. I would particularly like to mention the Steen family, Jesse Falk, and recently I came across a reference to Polly Ann Hendry Rowell, where it mentioned she was a family genealogist also. And I'm sure there were many others of whom I am unaware. Putting together this kind of detail and keeping it current is a labor of love, and the Hendry records are rich in details and information. Much of what I'm presenting derives from their efforts. Before I get into more details, I would like to mention that tonight's presentation is essentially the same presentation that we made at the James Madison reunion several months ago with slight modifications. Now let's go to the first part of the presentation. There's much to talk about as you look at the map of Scotland, and I'd like to quickly address it. What we believe the record shows that they before they came to America, the history books show that the Hendrys owned land and castles in Moray, Scotland. The story has it that they moved to the Hebrides, a group of islands west of the main island. Then they were given some land in the Lewis Island, north part of the Hebrides. And in time, it is said that they migrated to the Isle of Arran. Now, excuse me right there. On the islands, it is said that they lived in the northwest side of the island of Arran in a little town by the name of Pernille. I'll come back to that. I mentioned this town because I'd like to come back to it in a moment. So living on this beautiful island, such as Arran, you wonder why they left Scotland and they came to America. There are several plausible reasons. There's one in the history book, and then recently there was another piece of information which could be a standalone story, or perhaps it provides increased support for the reason addressed in the history book. First, the history book suggests that many Scots were being encouraged or sent to America because there had been a war and political conflict with Prince Charles, and there was much persecution and killing as a result of many Scots being on the losing side of the conflict. Now recently, however, we were sent some information, this was several months ago, from a staff member who works at the Heritage Museum of Arran that provides an additional reason, or perhaps further supports the reason for persecution taking place at the time. The correspondence we received was a copy of a petition appealing changes
being implemented and the farming methodologies at that time. The petition is dated 1749 and 1750. The narrative of the petition is barely understandable because of the Scottish language, but it was provided to us with a translation and a letter of explanation. Briefly, it appears as if there was a major change in the way farming was being accomplished at that time. The Duke, who owned most of the land on the island, was requiring all of the small farmers to come under the authority of one major farmer. This completely modified the way most farmers were caring for their families for generations. This had a significant social and economic impact on the farming community. So much so that 4 family members appealed to reverse that decision. And as a matter of fact, one of the families who had small children was being evicted from their land. These 4 Hendry family members came from the town of Permille. As you can see, these 4 here. They came from Permille, and that's the northwest side of the island, and where I would likely go if I were to visit the Isle of Arran again to do more research. As you can see, the 4 family members are obviously uneducated because they could not even sign their name. They just have R's and they have crosses and they have their own marks, as you can see. They were signed by Robert, William, Donald, and Charles. The petition was signed the 27th day of August, 1750. So could this be a reason for driving our forefathers to America? Absolutely. But are these our family members? We just aren't sure. But these thoughts or reasons are certainly plausible explanations for leaving your homeland. Now let's move on to the historical aspect of their migration within America, and particularly how the Hendrys became a prominent part of Taylor County, Florida. The starting point, or the anchor that I like to talk about, is John Hendry. With respect to John Hendry, there's not a lot of information. It's really unverifiable evidence. But the first information we have about him in the history books is John Hendry. There are a lot of questions about him, about whether he died before coming to America or he came to America with his 3 sons. We don't know that either. But as Arran mentioned, in the talks, the Isle of John Hendry buried in La Cranza, for whom was one of our objectives in trying to find, when we visited the island, is the John Hendry of our lineage? We don't know. But surely he could be a relative. But as I said, we just don't know. John is said, though, to have had 3 sons, Robert, James, and William, all of whom the records say were born on the Isle of Arran. 2 of the sons, James and William, we don't have any information on them, as far as I know. But the one that we do have information on is Robert. So the first link in the chain after we anchor to John Hendry is Robert Hendry. Robert Hendry is his father, where there appears to be some evidence of his life and historical significance to Taylor County. This is the first link in the chain after John. It is said that Robert was born in 1752 on the island of Arran, and one book says he came to America in about 1770, 1775 with his parents and 2 brothers. They settled in New Hanover County, North Carolina. He married an Ann Lee, and they had 9 children. He was a member of the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, and there's a great deal more information, but due to time, I'm going to skip over a great deal of that. We know the family moved to Liberty County, Georgia, where they lived in Taylor's Creek, Georgia. He and many other family members are buried in the Taylor's Creek Cemetery in Liberty County, Georgia. It said his home was up, wrong page. The fact that there are over 50 Hendry family members interred in the Taylor Creek Cemetery in Liberty County. And there are several that have been placed in community graves, since the graves were moved from the original Hendry Cemetery and they were moved to the present cemetery
when the military took over the acreage there. And they were put in a common grave because there was little evidence of their actual remains. And if time permits, at the end, I will touch upon the Taylor's Creek Cemetery, which is also an interesting piece of history because there's a lot of our family members, at least the Hendry family members, buried here. Robert died August 31st, 1830 in Liberty County, Georgia. Of Robert's 9 family members, the records show 4 were buried at Taylor's Creek in Liberty County, Georgia. 2 were never married. 1 appears to have lived and died in Morgan County, Georgia, and 1 lived in Hamilton County, Florida, west of Jennings. The records seem to suggest that the family member who is identified with funneling most family members eventually to Taylor County, Florida area is Robert's 3rd child, William. William was born in North Carolina in 1783. He married Nancy McPhail, and together they had 11 children. They moved to Georgia and lived in a part of Lowndes County, Georgia, which subsequently became Brooks County, Georgia. He was a founding member of the church campground Mount Zion in Mormon, Georgia, and his name is on a plaque at the entrance of the Mount Zion Cemetery. It is said that he had a large plantation near Quitman, Georgia, and he was a very influential man. But in 1840, a typhoid epidemic took the life of William, his wife Nancy, and his son Eli, all within a few weeks of each other. The records indicate he and his wife and son were buried in a cemetery west of Mule Creek. Aaron and I have spent time looking for this site, but we have not been successful in finding it yet. Now, William's children, there are 11. Of these 11, I see where 9 lived and died in places outside of Taylor County, including Thomas County, Georgia, Mississippi, and a couple other Florida locations. There were 2 who seemed to have major ties to Taylor County. They were Robert McPhail and sister Mary Wynn. That doesn't mean other family members did not have children who may have lived and passed through Taylor County at some time. But these 2 siblings seem to be the principal ones with numerous and long-standing ties with children living in Taylor County. First, let me address Mary Wynn, daughter of William, who does have several children that have been mentioned as having died and are buried in Taylor County, Florida. Mary Wynn Hendry married William Compton Carlton, and they had 15 children. The records seem to show only a couple where there was mention as having lived or died in Taylor County. The 3 children of Mary Wynn Carlton, I think there's 2, Richard and Robert, that's all, Richard and Robert, who appeared to have lived and passed away in Taylor County, Florida area. And if I've missed some names, please know it's not intentional. It is just a matter of trying to bring voluminous data down to more concise and meaningful presentation. So the next link in the chain is Robert McPhail Hendry. Robert McPhail Hendry was born in Liberty County. He married Martha Ann Carlton, and together they had 12 children. Robert is described as a progenitor of the Hendry family in Taylor County. It is said his home was on the south site, now occupied at the Hendry Cemetery in Shady Grove, Florida. Both Robert and his wife Martha Ann are buried in the Hendry Cemetery at Shady Grove. So it is said the one major family member contributing to passing down lineage with historical significance in Taylor County, Florida, is Robert McPhail. Most of his 12 children have long-standing lives here, and what you would call deep roots in Taylor County. All of these family members have history in Taylor County, Florida, and have been involved in educational, political, and religious organizations for most of their lives. Regarding the occupation of the ladies, there was 1 teacher, and the others were homemakers. With respect to the men's occupation, most were farmers and ministers, and most of them were involved in the Civil War. So where do we go from here? The next link in the chain from these 12 children expands exponentially to some 90 members, and then it just keeps growing and growing, many of which would claim Taylor County as their home, and that would include many of you all, I'm sure. It becomes considerably more difficult to identify further family members simply because of the volume. So this is where identification of additional Hendry lineage stops with me, tonight at least. It's safe to say there are likely at least 3 to 5 additional links of Hendry members that could be added to each of the children of Robert McPhail's family, after considering grandparents, parents, then adding children and grandchildren. Let me try to give you an idea of what I'm trying to say. Arran and I derive our lineage from Eli McPhail Hendry. He's our great-grandfather, the 11th child of Robert McPhail Hendry. Eli McPhail had 9 children, one of which was Alton C. Hendry, our grandfather. He married Callie Scott, and they had 5 children, one of which died as an infant. The living children were Norman C. Hendry, Charles E. Hendry, Joyce Hendry, who married my father, Robert Boatwright, and Samuel Hendry. Aaron's lineage is through Norman C., and mine is through my mother, Joyce Hendry Boatwright. Following this link, there are numerous children and grandchildren, the number of which is not incomprehensible for us, but in the aggregate for all of the Hendry family after Robert McPhail, it's overwhelming, I think. Hopefully, this gives you an idea what the next steps would be to add family links to your Hendry lineage. In conclusion, I would like to say our Hendry forefathers were top-notch, first-class oriented citizens. They were involved in the Lord's teaching and ministering capacities. They were involved in other people's lives. They were involved in political, educational, and other important issues. They were large, family devoted, hard-working ethic, men of integrity, appeared to have quality characteristics. I'm proud of the Hendry name and proud of my heritage. I might add that there's additional detailed information or suggestions that would enhance the presentation provided this evening. Please feel free to let us know. This concludes the portion of my presentation dealing with the Hendry ancestry, with the possible time, if there's time, to quickly address Taylor's Creek Cemetery, which is kind of interesting. If you haven't been there, I would be willing to give you a few minutes of that presentation if you'd like. There's just a few slides up there, but I mentioned the possibility of Taylor's Creek Cemetery in Liberty County, Georgia. This was an amazing discovery for me. I had read about this topic and wondered when I would get a chance to go by and visit the cemetery. I paid a visit several months ago. Taylor's Creek was a vibrant community at one time, but now all that remains are the memories and a cemetery. There is much history associated with the Civil War there, but the major undoing of the community was the takeover by the U.S. government in the early 1940s. The land is now known as Fort Stewart. The land, some 279,000 acres, was acquired by the U.S. Army to be used as an anti-aircraft training center. It is still in use today as a training facility, and entry to visit the cemetery must be authorized through the U.S. Army Post Authority. It is rich with family members' grave and is extremely interesting to tie into various family members with their lineage, with our lineage too. I would like to say there are well over 50 family members there, buried there, and it's the first time I saw names such as Bagley, Ryan, Shrupteen, family members of Hendry females who married and took the married names of their husbands. Taylor's Creek Cemetery is about 1/2 to an hour west of Savannah, and if you have the opportunity and interest, I would encourage you to take this tour. But first you need to get permission from the military authorities to ensure there's no live range activity close by, as I mentioned earlier. Also, if you're interested, I have a book, Taylor's County Creek put together, the Historical Society put together this book, very similar to the one that McNaughton book that we have on the Hendry plan, and that's available, and it's got a lot of information about Hendry family members in here. So if you're interested, I can give you an address or a telephone number to call. There's a lady that I've dealt with, and I'll be willing to give that information. You can take a look at it. And I took pictures of all the cemetery headstones, and it's an incredible, for me, it was an incredible trip. I enjoyed it very much. And that's about where we are. It concludes my presentation tonight. And thank you for coming, and Aaron and I would be available to answer any questions you might have.
Bob, I have a comment. Robert and Hendry, the conservator of the Hendry family in Taylor County, had 100 grandchildren.
Okay?
The 100th grandchild of Robert and Hendry is with us tonight. Lydia Hendry Andrews.
All right. Thank you for coming.
Living grandchild of our living.
How about that? Thank you. It's nice to know that. All right, who's next?
I just wondered how many people here have Hendry in their living.
Raise your hand if you have any relation. Sure enough.
Can I have another round of applause for a wonderful presentation? Like I said, y'all need to come to every program. We have a historical society because every one of y'all are related to every topic we talk about. And Lydia, we're not going to make you sound old by repeating that story every time.